When Michael Jordan walked into Madison Square Garden wearing a simple grey suit, the last thing he expected was to be stopped in his tracks by an arena employee who thought he was just another security guard trying to sneak into the wrong area. But what happened next in that hallway would teach everyone watching a lesson they'd never forget. The date was February 2019, and the basketball legend had traveled all the way from Charlotte with one mission in mind: to surprise his 17-year-old goddaughter, Alicia, at the biggest performance of her life. He'd deliberately chosen a quiet employee entrance to avoid the crowds, wanting to slip in unnoticed for once in his famous life. The arena lights blazed overhead as Michael Jordan stepped through the employee entrance of Madison Square Garden, his hands buried deep in the pockets of his charcoal grey suit. It was February 2019, and he'd flown in from Charlotte specifically to watch his goddaughter Alicia perform at halftime with her high school dance team. The 17-year-old had been practicing for months, and when she'd called him 3 weeks earlier, her voice trembling with excitement and nerves, asking if he could possibly make it, he hadn't hesitated for a second. Some promises mattered more than championships, and this was one of them. He deliberately arrived early, wanting to avoid the circus that inevitably surrounded him whenever he appeared in public. The suit was understated, no Jordan brand logos visible, just a man trying to blend into the background for once in his life. His security detail waited in a black SUV 2 blocks away per his request. Tonight wasn't about Michael Jordan, the legend. Tonight was about being Uncle Mike, the guy who used to let little Alicia stand on his shoes while he walked around her parents' living room, pretending they were dancing at a grand ball. The hallway stretched before him, concrete floors polished to a dull sheen, the distant roar of the crowd already building even though tip-off was still 90 minutes away. He walked with that same purposeful stride that had carried him down countless corridors in countless arenas, but this time nobody recognized him. The workers rushing past were focused on their clipboards and headsets, orchestrating the controlled chaos that happened behind the scenes of every major sporting event. That's when he heard the voice, sharp and accusatory, cutting through the ambient noise like a referee's whistle. "Hey, you can't be back here." Michael turned to see a woman in her mid-30s striding toward him, her arena staff jacket hanging open over a white blouse, her face flushed with the kind of self-importance that came from having a tiny bit of authority and needing everyone to know it. Her name tag read Stephanie Morrison, Guest Services Manager, and her eyes swept over him with unconcealed irritation. "Excuse me," Michael said, his tone even, giving her the benefit of the doubt that maybe she was just doing her job. "Security personnel aren't allowed in this corridor during event setup," Stephanie said, her voice rising slightly, as if volume would somehow make her point more valid. "You need to report to the main security office for your assignment. This is a restricted area for essential personnel only." The words hung in the air between them, and Michael felt something shift in his chest. Security personnel. She thought he was security. He glanced down at himself, at the grey suit that probably did look similar to what some of the more formally dressed security team wore, and he understood the mistake on a surface level. But there was something else in her tone, something dismissive and presumptuous that made his jaw tighten. "I'm not security," he said simply, keeping his voice calm. "I'm here to watch the game." Stephani's expression hardened. "Right. And I'm here to maintain order." "Nice try, but I've seen every excuse in the book. Whatever credentials you think you have, they don't apply to pre-game access in restricted corridors. Now I'm going to need to see your employee badge, or I'll have to call actual security to escort you out." A younger staff member, a kid who couldn't have been more than 20, had stopped a few feet away, his mouth hanging open slightly. Michael saw the recognition dawning in the kid's eyes, saw him start to open his mouth to say something, but Michael gave him a subtle shake of his head. The kid, bless him, stayed quiet, though his expression was now a mixture of horror and fascination at what was unfolding. "Ma," Michael tried again. "I understand you're doing your job, but I'm not an employee. I'm here as a guest. A guest who's wandering through employee corridors." Stephanie's laugh was brittle, humorless. That's exactly what someone trying to sneak into a restricted area would say. "I don't know what you're trying to pull, but it's not happening on my watch." She pulled out her radio, thumb hovering over the button. "Last chance. Show me your credentials or I'm making the call." The young staff member looked like he might pass out from second-hand embarrassment. A small crowd was beginning to form, other workers pausing in their tasks, sensing drama. Michael felt the familiar weight of a decision point, the same kind of moment that had defined countless games when the ball was in his hands and the clock was ticking down. He could pull out his phone, call his assistant, have someone from the Knicks front office down here in 30 seconds to smooth everything over. He could drop his name, watch Stephanie's face transform from smug certainty to mortified horror. He could even walk away, find another entrance, avoid the whole confrontation. But something made him pause. Maybe it was the accumulation of a lifetime of being recognized, being treated differently, being Michael Jordan in every room he entered. Maybe it was the chance to be anonymous for just a few more minutes. Or maybe, and this thought surprised him with its clarity, maybe it was the opportunity to see what happened when someone treated him like just another person trying to bend the rules. "You know what?" he said, and a small smile played at the corner of his mouth. "Why don't we make this interesting?" Stephanie's eyes narrowed. "I'm not playing games. Show me your credentials." "I'll show you my ticket," Michael interrupted gently. "I have a ticket to tonight's game. If I can produce a valid ticket proving I'm actually a guest here, what then? Then you still shouldn't be in employee areas." Stephanie shot back, but there was a flicker of uncertainty now. "Guests use guest entrances." "Fair point," Michael conceded. "But humor me. If I have a valid ticket, and I agree to head to the proper entrance, we can all go about our evening. But if you call security on me right now without giving me a chance to prove I'm supposed to be here, and it turns out you're wrong." He let the sentence hang, not as a threat, just as a logical consequence. The young staff member had been joined by two others, and they were all staring now, not at Michael but at Stephanie, waiting to see what she would do. The silence stretched like a rubber band pulled taut, and Michael could see the wheels turning in her head. She was committed to her position, had staked her authority on it, and backing down would mean losing face in front of her subordinates. "Fine," she said finally, crossing her arms. "Show me this supposed ticket. But it better be legitimate, because if this is some kind of scam..." Michael reached into his inside jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen a few times, pulled up his digital ticket and held it out for her to see. Stephanie leaned in, squinting at the screen, and Michael watched her face carefully. The ticket showed a courtside seat. Section A, Row 1. Premium seating that cost more than most people made in a month. "That could be faked," Stephanie said, but her voice had lost some of its certainty. "Anyone can Photoshop a ticket image." "You can scan it," Michael offered, nodding toward the scanner one of the other staff members was holding. "Verify it in your system." The young man with the scanner looked at Stephanie, then at Michael, clearly not wanting to be caught in the middle of this, but also not wanting to disobey a direct suggestion. Stephanie jerked her head in permission, and the scanner holder stepped forward nervously. He held up the device to Michael's phone screen, pressed the button, and everyone heard the cheerful beep that indicated a valid ticket. That's a real ticket," the young man said, his voice barely above a whisper. Courtside, Stephanie's face had gone from flushed to pale. "That doesn't explain why you're back here instead of using the main entrance like every other guest." "That's a fair question," Michael said, and his voice remained patient, almost kind. "I came in this way because I wanted to avoid the crowds. I'm here to see someone perform at halftime, Someone very important to me, and I thought using a quieter entrance would be less disruptive. I didn't realize this particular corridor was off limits. My mistake. Who are you here to see? Stephanie demanded, though her aggressive edge was weakening with each passing second. My goddaughter. She's dancing with her school's performance team. One of the other staff members, a woman probably in her 50s with kind eyes and silver streaks in her dark hair, spoke up softly. Stephanie, maybe we sh— I'm handling this, Patricia, Stephanie cut her off. She looked back at Michael, and he could see the war happening behind her eyes. She knew something was off. Knew the other staff members were acting strangely, but she'd gone too far to back down gracefully. Fine. You have a valid ticket, but you still need to use the proper entrance. I'll have someone escort you around to the main gates. That won't be necessary, Michael said. Just point me in the right direction, and I'll head there myself. Protocol requires, Stephanie started, but the young man with the scanner suddenly found his courage. Ms. Morrison, he interrupted, his voice cracking slightly. Do you know who that is? Stephanie turned to him with an expression that could have melted steel. I don't care if he's the President of the United States, he's not following proper procedures. That's Michael Jordan, the young man said, the words tumbling out in a rush. That's Michael freaking Jordan. The words seemed to echo in the corridor despite the ambient noise. Stephanie froze, her mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from water. She turned back to Michael, really looked at him for the first time, and he watched the recognition crash over her like a wave. The height, the build, the face that had been on everything from cereal boxes to movie screens to every highlight reel for the past 3 decades. Oh my God, she whispered, and all the color that had drained from her face came rushing back in a crimson flood. Oh my God, I'm so sorry, I should have. Michael held up a hand, stopping her mid-apology. You were doing your job. I respect that, but I accused you of, I almost called security on you. I thought. Stephanie looked like she might actually be sick. Mr. Jordan, I am so incredibly sorry. If you'd known it was me, you would have treated me differently, Michael said, and there was no accusation in his tone. Just a statement of fact. But the thing is, you didn't know, and that's actually kind of refreshing. The small crowd that had gathered was growing larger now, word spreading through the staff like wildfire. People were pulling out phones, probably texting co-workers, and Michael knew his window of anonymity was closing fast. But he kept his attention on Stephanie, who looked like she wanted the floor to open up and swallow her whole. Listen, he said, lowering his voice so only she and the few people closest could hear. You made an assumption based on what you saw. Was it the right assumption? No. But you were trying to protect the integrity of your workplace. That takes guts. Even if it was misdirected this time. I could lose my job over this, Stephanie said, and her voice was shaking now. If this gets out, if people hear that I tried to kick Michael Jordan out of the building, nobody's losing their job, Michael said firmly. As far as I'm concerned, this was just a misunderstanding. You didn't know who I was, you were following protocol. End of story. Patricia, the older woman who'd tried to intervene earlier, stepped closer. Mr. Jordan, on behalf of the entire Madison Square Garden staff, I apologize for any inconvenience. Is there anything we can do to make this right? Michael thought for a moment, glancing at his watch. Alicia's team would be arriving soon for their pre-performance warm-up. Actually, yes. My goddaughter is performing at halftime with the Jefferson High dance team. Is there any way I could get down to where they'll be warming up? I'd love to surprise her before she goes on. Absolutely, Patricia said immediately. I can take you there personally. And Stephanie, Michael added, looking back at the mortified guest services manager, why don't you come along? I'd like you to meet Alicia. She's the reason I'm here tonight. Stephanie looked like she might cry. Mr. Jordan, you don't have to. I know I don't have to, Michael said with a genuine smile. But I want to. Consider it my way of saying no hard feelings. The walk through the arena corridors took about 5 minutes, and by the time they reached the rehearsal space designated for the halftime performers, the story had already spread through the staff like lightning. Michael could hear the whispers following them, could see people peeking around corners and through doorways, but Patricia and Stephanie ran interference, keeping the path clear. The young man with the scanner, whose name turned out to be Devon, had insisted on coming along, claiming he needed to verify access to the rehearsal space, but really just wanting to be part of what was clearly becoming an unforgettable night. The rehearsal room was a converted locker room. Mirrors lining one wall, the Jefferson High dance team in matching warm-up suits, stretching and running through formations. Their coach, an energetic woman in her 40s, was calling out counts and corrections when Patricia knocked on the doorframe. "Excuse me, Coach Reynolds. Sorry to interrupt, but someone's here to see one of your dancers." The coach turned, ready to politely decline. They were less than an hour from performance and needed to focus, but her words died in her throat when she saw who was standing behind Patricia. Oh my goodness, Hey Coach, Michael said, stepping into the room. "I'm looking for Alicia Patterson. Her godfather's here." The entire room had gone silent, 15 teenage girls frozen in various stages of stretching and warming up, their mouths hanging open in identical expressions of shock. And then, from the back of the group, a voice pierced through the silence. "Uncle Mike." Alicia Patterson pushed through her teammates, her curly hair pulled back in a tight bun, her eyes wide with disbelief. She was tall for her age, graceful in that way that suggested she'd been dancing since before she could walk, and right now she looked like she couldn't decide whether to laugh or cry or scream. "Uncle Mike, what are you? You said you couldn't make it. You said Charlotte had that thing with the team and you..." She crashed into him with enough force to make him take a step back, her arms wrapping around him in a fierce hug. "You're here. You're actually here." "I'm here, baby girl," Michael said, returning the hug with equal intensity. "You think I'd miss this? Your first performance at the Garden? Not a chance." Alicia pulled back, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. "But you said..." "I lied," he admitted with a grin. "Wanted to surprise you. Your mom helped with the conspiracy." "Mom knew?" Alicia's voice pitched higher. "She's been watching me stress about this for weeks, and she knew you were coming the whole time. She's tougher than me, what can I say?" Michael laughed, then glanced at the other dancers who were still standing, frozen, staring at the scene like they were watching a movie. "You all going to introduce me to your team, or are they going to keep standing there looking like statues?" That broke the spell. The rehearsal room erupted into chaos. 15 teenage girls suddenly finding their voices all at once, questions and exclamations overlapping. Coach Reynolds had to whistle sharp and commanding to restore some semblance of order. Ladies, remember we have a performance in," she checked her watch, 47 minutes. "We can fangirl after we nail this routine." "Actually," Michael said, "I was hoping I could watch you run through it once. If that's okay with Coach Reynolds, I promise I'll be quiet." Coach Reynolds looked like someone had just offered her a winning lottery ticket. "Mr. Jordan, you want to watch our rehearsal?" "I flew up from Charlotte specifically for this," Michael said. "I'm not just here for the show. I'm here because I want to see how hard these young women have worked. Alicia's been telling about your practices, the dedication you all put in. I'd be honored to watch." The energy in the room shifted. What had been nervous excitement became focused determination. These girls wanted to impress, wanted to show Michael Jordan what they could do, and suddenly the halftime performance at Madison Square Garden became about more than just the crowd. It became personal. Stephanie, who had been standing quietly by the door, looking like she still couldn't believe this was happening, spoke up hesitantly. "Mr. Jordan, I should probably get back to my station. Thank you." "Hold on," Michael interrupted. "You're staying for this. But I need to—" "Stephanie," he said, and his voice carried that quiet authority that had commanded locker rooms and boardrooms. "You're staying. I want you to see why I'm here. Why I was willing to walk through that employee entrance and deal with the hassle. This is what matters." The music started, a driving beat that filled the converted locker room, and the Jefferson High dance team launched into their routine. They moved as one unit, 15 individual stories, woven into a single narrative of rhythm and motion. Alicia was in the center for several formations, and Michael watched her with undisguised pride. She'd been taking dance classes since she was 3, had lived and breathed it for 14 years, and here she was, about to perform on one of the world's most famous stages. The routine lasted 4 minutes, and when it ended, the dancers holding their final pose before breaking into nervous laughter and chatter, Michael stood and applauded. "That was incredible. You all are going to kill it out there." Coach Reynolds beamed. "We've been working on this since September. These girls have put in over 200 hours of practice. It shows," Michael said sincerely. He turned to Alicia. "Your mum and dad are out in the seats somewhere. They wanted to surprise you too, but I beat them to it. After your performance, I want you to come find me, okay? We're all going to dinner, your choice of restaurant." Alicia nodded, her eyes shining. "Okay, but Uncle Mike? Thank you for being here. Like really, this means everything." He pulled her into another hug. "There's nowhere else I'd rather be." As Patricia led them out of the rehearsal room so the team could finish preparing, Stephanie was quiet, her expression thoughtful. They were halfway back to the main concourse when she finally spoke. "Mr. Jordan, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Back there in the corridor, when I was being so awful to you, why didn't you just tell me who you were? Why did you let it go on so long?" Michael considered the question. Really thought about it. "Honestly, part of me wanted to see what would happen if I was just a regular guy. I spend every day being Michael Jordan, you know? The legend, the brand, the icon. People see me and they see all that before they see a person. You treated me like you'd treat anyone else who you thought was breaking the rules, and there was something refreshing about that, even if it was frustrating in the moment." "But I was so rude to you," Stephanie protested. "I didn't give you a chance to explain, I just assumed." "You assumed based on what you saw," Michael said. "And yeah, maybe you were a little quick to jump to conclusions, but you were also just trying to do your job right. I've been around long enough to know the difference between someone being malicious and someone being overzealous. You were the latter." They had reached the main concourse now, the arena filling with fans streaming in through the gates, the energy building toward tip-off. Devon, the young scanner operator, was still trailing along, seemingly unable to believe his night had turned into whatever this was. "Can I tell you what I really learned back there?" Michael said, stopping and turning to face Stephanie directly. "I learned that you're exactly the kind of person organizations need. Someone who takes their responsibility seriously, who doesn't make exceptions just because someone asks nicely, who stands their ground even when it's uncomfortable. You just need to work on reading situations a little better, maybe giving people the benefit of the doubt before going full enforcement mode." Stephanie laughed, a real laugh this time, the tension finally breaking. "My husband tells me I have 2 speeds, off and maximum enforcement. Subtlety is not my strong suit." "Then work on developing a middle speed," Michael suggested. "But don't lose that fire, that commitment to doing things right. That's valuable. That's what makes someone good at their job." Patricia cleared her throat gently. "Mr. Jordan, if you'd like, I can show you to your seat now. We have about 20 minutes until tip-off." "That sounds good," Michael agreed. He turned to Stephanie one more time. "Hey, When you tell this story to people, and you will tell this story to people because it's a good story, do me a favor. Anything, Stephanie said. Don't just tell them about the part where you tried to kick me out. Tell them about what happened after. Tell them that mistakes happen, but how we handle them is what matters. Tell them that I didn't hold it against you because you were doing what you thought was right. Deal? Stephanie nodded, her eyes getting a little misty. Deal. And Mr. Jordan, I really am sorry, not just for not recognizing you, but for not listening to you in the first place. Apology accepted, Michael said, extending his hand. She shook it, her grip firm, despite the tremor of emotion running through her. Now go do your job. Make sure everyone else follows the rules, even if they are supposed to be here. As Patricia guided him toward the courtside seats, Devon finally spoke up, his voice full of wonder. Mr. Jordan, can I ask you something? Sure, Devon. Why were you so nice to her? I mean, she was really out of line. You could have gotten her fired. You could have made a whole scene. But instead you invited her to meet your goddaughter and gave her advice and acted like it was no big deal. Michael stopped walking and looked at the young man seriously. You know what the hardest thing about success is, Devon? It's remembering that you're still just a person. Fame and money and achievements, they can make you forget that other people are just trying to get through their day, just trying to do their jobs, just trying to make it work. Stephanie made a mistake, but she was trying. And trying, even when you mess up, is worth respecting. So you're saying you weren't mad at all, Devon pressed. Oh, I was a little irritated at first, Michael admitted with a chuckle. Nobody likes being accused of something they didn't do. But then I thought about all the times in my career when people doubted me, when they made assumptions about what I could or couldn't do, and I remembered that sometimes being underestimated is actually a gift. It gives you a chance to prove something, to exceed expectations. Stephanie underestimated who I was, but she also gave me a chance to show her something real about character and grace under pressure. They had reached his seat now, the legendary courtside vantage point where so many games had been witnessed, so many moments had unfolded. The Knicks were playing the Celtics, a classic rivalry game, but Michael knew he'd be watching something else during halftime, something that mattered more to him than any professional sporting event could. Patricia made sure he was settled, offered to bring him anything he needed, and then she and Devon headed back to their stations, leaving Michael alone with his thoughts. Around him, fans were beginning to notice his presence. The whispers starting, phones coming out for photos, but security was maintaining a respectful perimeter. He signed a few autographs for kids who approached nervously, posed for a couple of pictures, but his mind was elsewhere. He thought about Alicia as a little girl, the way she used to spin around his living room wearing a princess dress and light-up sneakers, declaring that she was going to be a dancer when she grew up. He thought about her parents, his best friend from college, and his college sweetheart, who had asked him to be Alicia's godfather 17 years ago, with tears in their eyes. He thought about all the recitals and competitions he'd attended over the years, sitting in auditorium seats or gymnasium bleachers, watching her grow from a clumsy kid into a graceful young woman with dreams as big as the sky. The game started, but Michael was only half watching. His mind kept drifting back to the encounter with Stephanie, analyzing it the way he used to analyze opponents' defensive schemes. What had started as a frustrating case of mistaken identity had turned into something else entirely, a reminder that life's most interesting moments often come from unexpected places. He could have handled it differently. He could have been insulted, offended, angry. He could have pulled rank, demanded apologies, made someone's evening miserable. But what would that have taught anyone? What would that have proven, except that power corrupts, and that being famous means never having to be gracious? His parents had raised him better than. His own journey through poverty to greatness had taught him that how you treat people especially people who have nothing to offer you, reveals your true character. The first half played out in front of him, a competitive back-and-forth affair, but Michael found himself checking his watch repeatedly. Finally, halftime arrived, and the arena staff began setting up for the performance. The lights dimmed. The video board lit up with the Jefferson High logo, and the announcer's voice boomed through the arena. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to center court, performing their award-winning contemporary routine, the Jefferson High School dance team. The music began. That same driving beat from the rehearsal room, but now amplified through the garden sound system, and the team appeared from the tunnel, running onto the court with practiced precision. Michael leaned forward in his seat, his hands clasped together, his full attention locked on the 15 young women who commanded the spotlight with poise and power. Alicia was brilliant. Every movement was crisp, every expression carefully crafted to match the emotional arc of the music. But more than that, watching her perform with her team, Michael saw something that transcended technical skill. He saw joy. He saw passion. He saw a young woman doing exactly what she was meant to do in that moment, sharing her gift with thousands of strangers and making them feel something real. The routine built to its climax, a series of complex lifts and turns that had the crowd gasping, and then settled into a quiet denouement, the dancers moving through a final sequence that was somehow both melancholy and hopeful. The final pose held for a long moment before the lights came up and the crowd erupted in applause. Michael was on his feet before he consciously decided to stand, clapping and whistling like he was sitting in the bleachers at a championship game. Around him, other spectators were standing too, giving the Jefferson High dance team a standing ovation that filled the arena with thunderous appreciation. On the court, he could see Alicia searching the crowd, and when their eyes met, her face broke into a smile so radiant it could have powered the building. The team took their bows and jogged off the court, making way for the second half preparations. But Michael was already texting Alicia's mother. "She was perfect," he typed. "Meet us at the tunnel entrance after the game. Dinner celebration at wherever she wants." 3 laughing crying emojis came back immediately, followed by, "She's going to be on cloud 9 for weeks." The second half of the game passed in a blur. Michael watched, applauded at the appropriate moments, even exchanged pleasantries with some of the courtside regulars he knew from years of attending games. But his mind was elsewhere, running through the events of the evening like rewinding tape, seeing connections and meanings he'd missed in the moment. That encounter with Stephanie hadn't been just about mistaken identity. It had been about assumptions and expectations, about the stories we tell ourselves about others based on limited information. She'd seen a man in a grey suit in an employee corridor and constructed an entire narrative about who he was and what he was doing there, a narrative that turned out to be completely wrong. But hadn't he done the same thing in reverse? Hadn't he assumed she was just another officious bureaucrat on a power trip, when really she was just someone trying to maintain order in her small corner of a chaotic world? The game ended with the Celtics pulling out a narrow victory, but nobody in the arena seemed particularly devastated. It had been entertaining basketball, the kind of regular season game that wouldn't be remembered next week, but had served its purpose of providing a few hours of distraction and excitement. As the crowd began filtering toward the exits, Michael made his way to the tunnel entrance where Alicia's parents were waiting, her mother Gloria still dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "She was incredible," Gloria said, hugging Michael tightly. "I can't believe our baby girl just performed at Madison Square Garden." "Believe it," Michael said. "She earned every second of that spotlight." Alicia appeared a few minutes later, still in her performance outfit but with a Jefferson High jacket thrown over it, her face flushed with exertion and triumph. She ran to her parents first, letting them envelope her in hugs and praise, but then she turned to Michael with an expression he'd remember for the rest of his life. Did you see the lift sequence? We nailed it. Coach said it was our best performance ever and the crowd loved it. And oh my God, Uncle Mike, I can't believe you were here for this. Wouldn't have missed it for the world, he said, pulling her into a hug. You ready for that celebration dinner? Can we go to Carmine's? Alicia asked. I've been craving their pasta since we got on the bus this morning. Carmine's it is, Michael agreed. Let me just say goodbye to someone first. He found Stephanie near the guest services office, still in her arena jacket, looking exhausted but satisfied with a successful event under her belt. When she saw him approaching, she straightened, a flicker of that earlier nervousness returning. Mr. Jordan, I hope you enjoyed the game. I enjoyed the halftime show even more, Michael said warmly. Listen, I wanted to thank you. Stephanie blinked. Thank me? For what? For reminding me that being recognized everywhere I go isn't always a blessing. For treating me like anyone else, even if it was based on a misunderstanding. And for giving me a good story to tell at dinner tonight. I gave you a story. Stephanie laughed. I'm pretty sure I gave myself a story that's going to haunt me at family gatherings for the next decade. Make it a good story, Michael advised. Make it about growth and learning, not just about the embarrassing part. That's how you turn mistakes into wisdom. They shook hands again, and Michael headed back to where Alicia and her parents were waiting. As they walked toward the exit, Alicia linked her arm through his. Uncle Mike, why do you look so happy? I mean, beyond the obvious reasons. You know what, Licia, I had kind of a weird evening before your performance. Got mistaken for security, had a whole thing in the employee corridors. Could have been annoying, but it turned into something good. Reminded me that the best moments in life are the ones where we choose grace over anger, understanding over indignation. That's very wise and philosophical, Alicia teased. Are you getting soft in your old age? Hey now, Michael protested with mock offense. 30+ years of fame haven't made me soft. Just more aware of what really matters. Later that night, sitting at a large table at Carmine's, surrounded by Alicia's family and half her dance team who'd been invited to join the celebration, Michael took a moment to look around at the chaos of laughter and stories and teenage energy. This, he thought, was success, not the championships or the endorsements or the legacy. Those things were important. They were part of his story, but they weren't the whole story. The whole story was in moments like this, when you could show up for someone you loved and watch them shine, when you could turn a potentially ugly confrontation into a teaching moment, when you could remember that being a legend mattered less than being a good person. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mr. Jordan, this is Stephanie Morrison from MSG Tonight. I wanted to say thank you again for your kindness and grace. You could have made my evening terrible, but instead you made it memorable for all the right reasons. I won't forget it. Also, I looked up your goddaughter's dance team. They're competing at nationals next month. If you need someone to vouch for you at employee entrances, I'm your girl. She's lucky to have you in her. Michael smiled and typed back, she's made me lucky by being in my life. Take care, Stephanie. Keep being exactly who you are, just maybe with slightly less immediate assumption next time. The response came quickly, deal. Enjoy your pasta. Across the table, Alicia was demonstrating one of the routine's moves to a teammate, her hands gesturing wildly as she described the choreography, her face alive with passion. Michael watched her and thought about all the times he'd stood on basketball courts with that same expression, that same fire, that same absolute certainty that he was exactly where he belonged, doing exactly what he was meant to do. The specifics were different. She was dancing while he'd been playing ball, but the essence was identical. The pursuit of excellence, the joy of performance, the satisfaction of preparation meeting opportunity and producing something beautiful. Someone proposed a toast to Alicia, to Jefferson High, to memorable performances, and glasses clinked around the table. Michael raised his water glass and added his own silent toast to unexpected encounters, to the grace of anonymity, to the reminder that every interaction is a choice between hardening your heart and opening it wider. Tonight in a corridor at Madison Square Garden, he'd been given a choice. He could have chosen ego and indignation. Instead, he'd chosen patience and understanding, and that choice had rippled outward, turning what could have been a viral video of Michael Jordan getting disrespected into something quieter but more meaningful. The pasta arrived, family-style platters covering every inch of the table, and the conversation shifted to food and the logistics of getting the team back to their hotel. Michael found himself thinking about what Devon had asked earlier. Why had he been so nice to Stephanie? The easy answer was that he was a good person who didn't believe in punishing honest mistakes. But the deeper answer, the one he was only now fully understanding, was that every moment of recognition, every time someone treated him differently because of who he was, moved him further from the person he actually wanted to be. The encounter with Stephanie had been a gift wrapped in frustration, a chance to experience what it felt like to be seen as just another person trying to navigate a complicated situation. And his response to that gift determined whether it remained a gift or became a curse. "Uncle Mike, you're doing that thing again," Alicia said, waving a breadstick in his direction. "That faraway look like you're analyzing game footage in your head." "Just thinking," Michael said, returning his attention to the present moment. "About how proud I am of you, about how lucky I am to be here." "Lucky?" Gloria scoffed affectionately from down the table. "The man who won 6 championships and became arguably the greatest basketball player of all time is sitting in a restaurant talking about luck." "Especially lucky," Michael corrected. "Because success is easy. Success is a formula. Work hard, develop skills, execute under pressure, repeat. But this," he gestured around the table, "being part of someone's important moments, being trusted to show up and matter, that's not formula, that's grace, that's blessing, that's something you don't earn through talent or determination. That's something people give you because they love you." The table had gone quiet. Everyone listening now. Alicia's father, Marcus, spoke up. "Mike, when we asked you to be Alicia's godfather all those years ago, we knew you were going to be busy. We knew you had a career and businesses and obligations. We never expected you to show up for every little thing." "This wasn't a little thing," Michael said firmly. "This was her performing at the Garden. This was 17 years of dedication and training and dreaming manifesting in 4 minutes of perfection. How could I not be here?" "But that's exactly what I mean," Marcus continued. "You've never treated anything involving Alicia as optional or secondary. You've shown up. Consistently, repeatedly, no matter what else was happening in your life. Do you know what that's taught her?" Michael shook his head. "It's taught her that she's worth showing up for," Gloria said, her voice thick with emotion. "It's taught her that the people who love her will prioritize her, will make her feel valued, will demonstrate through action that she matters. That's a lesson that's going to shape her entire life. Every relationship she has, every standard she sets for how people should treat her." Michael felt something catch in his throat. He'd thought of his relationship with Alicia as something he did because he loved her, because Marcus and Gloria were family to him, because being a godfather was a responsibility he took seriously. He hadn't considered the broader implications, the way his consistent presence might be building a foundation for how she understood her own worth. "I just love her," he said simply. "The rest is just logistics." "And that," Alicia said, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand, "is why you're the best godfather in the history of godfathers. You make it look effortless even though I know it's not." The dinner continued, the conversation flowing naturally from topic to topic, laughter punctuating the evening like exclamation points. At one point, One of Alicia's teammates, a girl named Jasmine with bright pink highlights in her hair, leaned over and said quietly to Michael, "Miss Jordan, can I ask you something kind of random?" "Sure, Jasmine." "Do you ever get tired of being recognized everywhere you go? Like, is there ever a part of you that wishes you could just be anonymous and normal?" Michael considered the question carefully. Yes and no. The recognition comes with responsibilities, being aware of how I'm representing myself and my brand, understanding that people are watching and forming opinions, knowing that I'm carrying a certain legacy everywhere I go. That can be exhausting. But it also opens doors, creates opportunities, lets me impact people's lives in ways I never could have as just a regular person. "But tonight," Jasmine pressed, "before the game, when you came to see us at rehearsal, someone told me you had this whole thing where someone didn't recognize you and tried to kick you out. Were you mad about that?" "At first, a little," Michael admitted. "Nobody likes being accused of something they didn't do. But then I realized it was actually kind of refreshing. This person, she saw me as just another guy potentially breaking the rules. She didn't give me special treatment because I'm Michael Jordan. She just did her job." "And you weren't insulted?" "Why would I be insulted by someone having integrity?" Michael countered. "She could have looked the other way, assumed I probably had a good reason to be there, let it slide. But instead she stopped me, questioned me, insisted on following protocol. That takes courage. That takes commitment to doing things right. I can't be mad at someone for having those qualities." Jasmine nodded thoughtfully. "I think I'd have been mad. If someone accused me of lying or sneaking around when I wasn't, I'd probably have gotten defensive and angry. And that would be a natural response," Michael said. "But here's what I've learned over the years. Your first emotional reaction doesn't have to be your final response. You can feel anger or frustration or indignation, and then you can choose how to channel those feelings. You can let them control you, or you can control them. Tonight I felt irritated for about 30 seconds, but then I made a choice to be curious instead. Why was this person reacting this way? What was she trying to protect? What could I learn from the situation?" "And what did you learn?" Jasmine asked. Michael smiled. "I learned that I'd gotten too comfortable being recognized. I'd started to expect special treatment without even realizing it. This woman reminded me that just because I'm Michael Jordan doesn't mean the rules don't apply to me. And that's a good reminder to get every now and then." The conversation shifted again, but Michael found himself thinking about what he'd just said. Had he gotten comfortable with special treatment? When he walked into a room, doors opened, literally and figuratively. Reservations appeared at fully booked restaurants. Airlines shuffled schedules. People rearranged their lives to accommodate him. Not because he demanded it, but because his presence carried weight and influence. Over time, those accommodations had become so normalized that he'd stopped noticing them, stopped questioning whether they were appropriate or earned in any given moment. Stephanie Morrison had interrupted that pattern. She'd said no to Michael Jordan, not out of malice or ignorance, but out of principle, and instead of accepting that gracefully from the start, his first instinct had been to prove her wrong, to establish his legitimacy, to reassert his status. It was a small thing, barely worth noting in the grand scheme of his life, but it revealed something about how decades of fame had subtly shaped his expectations and responses. The dinner wound down eventually, the dance team members exchanging phone numbers and promises to stay in touch, making plans to meet up at Nationals next month. Alicia hugged each of her teammates goodbye, then turned to Michael with an expression that was suddenly serious. "Uncle Mike, can we talk for a minute? Just us?" They stepped outside the restaurant while Gloria and Marcus handled the bill, despite Michael's protests. The New York night was cool. the streets still buzzing with activity despite the late hour. Alicia leaned against the brick wall of the building, looking up at the sliver of sky visible between the towering structures. "I want to tell you something, but I don't want it to sound like I'm being dramatic or making too big a deal of it," she began. "Whatever you want to say it," Michael encouraged. "I promise not to judge. Tonight, performing at the Garden, it was the biggest moment of my dance career so far. Probably will be the biggest moment for a while until we get to nationals and maybe beyond. And I was so nervous, Uncle Mike, like physically sick, nervous, because I knew you were supposed to be in Charlotte. I knew you had work stuff, and I told myself it was okay if you couldn't make it because I'm 17 now and I need to learn to handle big moments without needing my safety blankets." Michael stayed quiet, letting her work through her thoughts. "But then you were there," Alicia continued, her voice catching slightly. "You were actually there, in the rehearsal room, surprising me when I'd convinced myself you couldn't come. And suddenly everything shifted. I wasn't performing for thousands of strangers anymore. I was performing for you, and that made me braver somehow, more confident, more willing to take risks and really commit to the routine." "You would have been brilliant either way," Michael said gently. "Maybe," Alicia conceded, "but I wouldn't have felt the same. And that's what I wanted to tell you. It's not just about you showing up, although that matters. It's about what your presence gives me permission to do. When you're watching, I know I'm safe to fail. I know that even if I fall or mess up or completely bomb, you'll still be proud of me for trying. That safety net, that unconditional support, it's what lets me fly." Michael felt his chest tighten with emotion. "Alicia, you don't need me to give you permission to be brave. That's all you—" "But it's not though," she insisted. "Or at least it's not just me. It's what you've shown me over the years about what love looks like in action. You don't just say you're proud of me or that you believe in me. You prove it. You buy plane tickets and rearrange schedules and show up in rehearsal rooms. You turn abstract feelings into concrete reality. And that's taught me that when I love something or someone, I should show them through my actions, not just my words." "That's a good lesson," Michael said, his voice rough. "It's the best lesson," Alicia said, "and I know I don't say it enough, but thank you. Thank you for being the kind of person who shows up. Thank you for making me feel worth showing up for. Thank you for tonight, for the surprise, for everything." They stood in silence for a moment, the city humming around them, both of them processing the weight of what had been said. Finally, Michael pulled her into a hug. "You're going to do amazing things, Alicia, not just in dance, but in life. You're going to be the kind of person other people look up to, the kind of person who shows up for people she loves, the kind of person who makes the world better just by being in it. I'm proud of you, but more than that, I'm grateful I get to witness who you're becoming." They went back inside to find Gloria and Marcus waiting by the door, both of them wearing knowing smiles that suggested they'd been watching through the window. The four of them walked back to where Michael's car was waiting, the streets of Manhattan slowly quieting as the night deepened. As they said their goodbyes and Michael climbed into the back seat of the SUV, he pulled out his phone and opened his notes app. He wanted to capture something about tonight before the details faded, wanted to preserve not just what had happened but what it had meant. His fingers moved across the screen, typing quickly. "Tonight I was mistaken for a security guard. Could have been offended. Instead, chose curiosity. Remembered that being seen as ordinary is actually extraordinary when you're never allowed to be ordinary. Met a woman who taught me about integrity without meaning to. Watched my goddaughter dance at the Garden and understood that showing up is the most important currency I have. Legacy isn't just what you win or achieve, it's who you choose to be in moments when nobody would blame you for choosing differently." He read it back, considered editing it, then left it as is. The SUV pulled away from the curb, heading toward his hotel, and Michael watched the city lights blur past the window. His mind kept returning to Stephanie, to that moment in the corridor when she'd stood her ground despite not knowing who he was. There was something admirable in that, something that reminded him of his younger self, the kid from North Carolina who'd been cut from his high school team and had to prove himself every single day just to be taken seriously. Success had insulated him from that kind of challenge. Now when he walked into a room, people assumed competence, assumed excellence, assumed authority. Nobody questioned his right to be there or his ability to contribute. The burden of proof had shifted from him to anyone who doubted him. But that shift had come with a cost. The loss of that hungry, proving something edge that had defined his early years. Maybe, he thought, that's what made the encounter with Stephanie so valuable. She'd forced him, if only for a few minutes, to remember what it felt like to have someone doubt him, to have to justify his presence, to earn respect, rather than having it automatically granted. And his response to that challenge, patience rather than anger, grace rather than indignation, felt like a different kind of victory than any he'd achieved on a basketball court. The SUV pulled up to his hotel, the doorman rushing to open the door, the desk staff straightening as he entered the lobby, everyone suddenly alert and attentive. Michael moved through the practiced choreography of being Michael Jordan in a public space. The acknowledgement, the brief smile, the purposeful stride that suggested both accessibility and boundary. In his room, he loosened his tie and sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Thanks for tonight, Mike. You made Alicia's year. Hell, you made her whole high school career. Love you, brother." Michael typed back, "She made mine too. That performance was special. Tell her I'm still thinking about that final sequence. Perfection." Another text came in, this one from an unfamiliar number but with a message that made him smile. "Mr. Jordan, this is Devon from MSG. I just wanted to say thank you for being so cool tonight. Watching how you handled everything taught me something about grace under pressure. Also, Stephanie told me to tell you she's framing her name tag from tonight as a reminder about assumptions. Hope you enjoyed the game." Michael considered not responding. His publicist was always warning him about engaging too much with random numbers. But something made him type, "Devon, thanks for having my back tonight. Keep being the kind of person who speaks up when something's wrong, even when it's uncomfortable. That's leadership. And tell Stephanie I hope she remembers the whole story, not just the embarrassing part. The redemption is what makes it meaningful." He set his phone down and moved to the window, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. 20 floors below, the city continued its perpetual motion. Millions of people living their lives, having their own defining moments, making their own choices about who they wanted to be. Somewhere out there, Alicia was probably still buzzing with adrenaline, replaying the performance in her mind, texting her teammates about every detail. Somewhere else, Stephanie was maybe telling her husband about the insane night she'd had, about almost throwing Michael Jordan out of Madison Square Garden. And Devon was probably posting cryptic messages on social media about having witnessed something interesting. All of these ripples from one misunderstanding, one choice to respond with grace instead of anger, one decision to see an obstacle as an opportunity. Michael thought about all the times in his career when he'd been doubted or dismissed or underestimated, and how those moments had fueled him, had driven him to prove everyone wrong. But this was different. Tonight wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about being the kind of person he wanted to be when nobody was watching, when the cameras were off, when the only measure of success was his own internal compass. He realized, standing there in the darkness of his hotel room, that this was perhaps the most important victory of his life, not the championships or the MVP awards or the Olympic gold medals, but the quiet triumph of choosing patience over pride, understanding over indignation, grace over ego. These were the moments that defined character, that revealed whether success had made you better or just bigger. His phone buzzed one more time, a text from Alicia with a string of heart emojis and a simple message, "Best night ever. Love you, Uncle Mike." He smiled, typed back, "Love you too, kiddo. Can't wait for nationals," and then set the phone aside for the night. The next morning, Michael caught an early flight back to Charlotte. As he settled into his seat, scrolling through email and messages, he came across a notification from Twitter. His curiosity piqued. He opened the app and saw that someone had posted a video from the previous night. His heart sank slightly. Here it came, the viral moment, the story that would get twisted and sensationalized and turned into content. But as he watched the video, he realized it wasn't from the hallway incident at all. It was footage from Alicia's performance, shot from somewhere in the upper bowl, the Jefferson High dance team moving in perfect synchronization across the Madison Square Garden court. And there, visible in the corner of the frame, was Michael Jordan on his feet, clapping enthusiastically, his face lit up with unmistakable pride and joy. The caption read, "Michael Jordan watching his goddaughter perform at MSG last night. This is what legends look like when they're off the clock, showing up for the people they love. Class act." The video had already been shared thousands of times, comments pouring in about the sweetness of the moment, about how it humanized someone who often seemed larger than life, about how this was what really mattered in the end. No mention of security guards or mistaken identity or confrontations in hallways. Just a man watching someone he loved achieve a dream and letting his genuine emotion show. Michael smiled and closed the app. Sometimes, he thought, the best stories are the ones that focus on the right details, the meaningful moments, the substance rather than the spectacle. The encounter with Stephanie would remain between him and the handful of people who'd witnessed it, a private lesson about grace and assumptions and the importance of how we treat each other when recognition isn't guaranteed. But this Alicia's moment of triumph, his presence in the audience, the visible evidence of love in action, this was the story worth telling. This was what deserved to go viral, to be shared and celebrated and held up as an example. Not Michael Jordan, the six-time champion. Not Michael Jordan, the billionaire businessman. Not Michael Jordan, the global icon. Just Michael Jordan, the godfather, showing up, being present, making someone feel valued through the simple act of being there. As the plane took off, banking over the New York skyline, Michael closed his eyes and thought about what he'd tell people when they inevitably asked about his trip. He'd tell them about Alicia's performance, about the standing ovation, about the celebration dinner afterward. He'd talk about the joy of watching someone you love succeed, about the privilege of being trusted to witness their important moments. And if anyone asked whether anything interesting happened before the game, he'd just smile and say that sometimes the most valuable experiences are the ones that teach you something about yourself when you weren't expecting to learn anything at all. Because that was the real story of the night, the one that mattered most. Michael Jordan had been mistaken for a security guard, and what he'd done next wasn't dramatic or sensational or designed to make headlines. What he'd done next was choose grace, offer understanding, turn a potential conflict into a teaching moment, and then go watch his goddaughter dance like nobody was watching, even though everyone was. That was the victory. That was the legacy. That was what it meant to be great, not just at basketball, but at being human. So where are you watching this story from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. We love hearing from our amazing community around the world. If this story touched your heart and reminded you about the power of grace and showing up for the people you love, smash that like button and subscribe to our channel. Let's spread more kindness together, one story at a time, and don't go anywhere. Click on the video appearing on your screen right now for another incredible story that will inspire you. See you in the next.